Hello world. Patricia O'Connor and Frida Reba Darcy here. I kind of threw my co-star Curve. She's relaxing on the couch, but she just heard the music cue up and is kind of looking at me with one ear up. Well, I mean, she always kind of has one ear up, but she's got a perplexed look on her face like, am I meant? Yeah, you are. This is us on the bonsai balcony. We're going to do a little program today. It's a sunny, mostly sunny day. It is quite warm. However, whenever I look off in the distance and kind of do that 1,000-yard stare thing to try to see if there's any like light rain out there, I always see something. It's like there's constantly water blowing around, even on our sunny days. And we're out of the weather, I think, for a day or two until our next band of showers gets here. But today we're going to talk about January 17th, or what's going on with bonsai in winter. Bonsai in winter can be tricky. It can throw you all kind of curves. Some of our trees love these California winters. Like my oak here, it is really enjoying this extra rainwater. The side of the tree that is hugging the pot a little close and doesn't have a lot of substrate in between it and the edge of the pot. That's hard to water thoroughly without just pouring water all over the side of the pot. So when it's raining, it gets probably better water than when I'm standing there on that side trying to do it in about 3 different times. You know, I'll pour it till it starts pouring everywhere, and I'll back off and let all that soak in, and then I'll come back a minute later and do it again, and it's because I've only got an area about that big between the edge of the root ball and the wall. So rainy weathers, on rainy days, especially when that side is facing out and it's just getting drizzled on all day, it gets a good soaking. And also, I've kind of always been under the theory that rainwater, it can only have so much oxygen or it evaporates, right? There's a ratio there, but it can be oxygen rich, and you're always going to have oxygen rich water if it's rainwater, because it's just falling through the atmosphere before it gets here. So some of our trees, which is our long way of saying, some of our trees really love it, and some of them not so much. We've got a few trees here that are kind of sick of the amount of water, and so it makes, before we get too much further, Frida Reba Darcy, some trees really aren't into this. What I mean is my pine trees are the kind of trees that are going to go dormant in winter, and at the same time, California winters, it depends on how bad you really need to go in that dormancy thing and what's required for you to do so. This Ponderosa, probably not so much in dormancy right now, because this winter is probably one of the warmer seasons this tree has ever had, second only to the summer it just been here. No, that's not quite true. It's very short season where it came from. The temperatures would get ridiculously hot 5,000 feet up on the side of a mountain. The flip side to that is its growing season was incredibly short. 4 months and it was done and back in the snow. So I run the risk of running this guy into the ground. But look at that yellow pine behind us. I have not watered that tree in over a week, and that is almost ludicrous for a tree that's that small. But a little scratch on the surface shows me that this guy is still wet below the surface, and the yellowness of that needles are telling me that it's well and truly had enough. Its metabolism has slowed down because it's winter. Even though it doesn't feel super cold to me, its metabolism has slowed down because of winter. As I've stated before, this tree is planted in really, really fine akadama, which retains water overly. So it's slowed down its metabolism, it's slowed down its ability to need water, so it's not taking it up as fast. We don't have as much heat to cause evaporation or for it to naturally transpire the water. And then it's the only one out of all of these that has that pure akadama mix, which I get away with easier in the heat of summer when evaporation is going to have some say in it. But like I said, I haven't watered this tree in going on a week, and it is still not the day to water it. The good news is it looks a little greener to me than it did yesterday. I'm not having that problem with most of my other pines, but I am some. I'm concerned about this guy. But a lot of our other trees, I mean, you can sit there and have reasons to take things personal, but then by the same live by the sword, die by the sword kind of a mentality, there's always reason to take heart and say, well, see, you have trees that are actually responding well to the things that we're doing. So let's just try to get a handle on this water thing once and for all. But that's kind of what winter is. Winter is kind of a hard nut to crack. A lot of people, and I live in what I consider to be paradise. These warmer winters are kind of why I moved here years ago. That was, to me, worth the price of admission, which does cost, rent costs more here. Other things cost more, and a lot of other things that are important, though, don't. So, peace of mind doesn't cost more here. So that's all considered. We're going through our little winter thing. My Ponderosas seem to be doing well. Moved back from the wall. They're still getting quite a bit of light, but at the same time, most of these guys are overpotted, and I am waiting a little longer. I get to watch when I water one of these Ponderosas. This part that looks maybe a little light gray turns black and dark looking, and I know as that starts to change colors to a lighter color how dry the tree is or not. So that's what's going on there. I just had an idea for tonight's show. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to bring in 6 Ponderosas, 6 Ponderosa pines, and we are going to weed them. Those little guys are looking kind of weedy. So that's the other thing. In winter here, it doesn't get cold enough to kill the grass or the weeds. But yeah, good on that, I guess. If you're a weed, it's a good place to hang out here. Sorry about the motor they just fired up. It's kind of wrecking our sound, but that's all part of life in the big city. Winter, yeah. I'm happy with the way some of these guys are doing, though. Most of our little trees are pretty happy. A couple of days ago, I was concerned about this guy being kind of yellow. We've recovered our color in it somewhat. This little Pondo here is pretty dang happy. So we've kind of acquired our balance. We have lost. We've got another loss to announce. I've hinted that this was coming. We've lost Frankenpine. The reason we lost Frankenpine is a couple of reasons. Having looked at it and thought about it, we had Frankenpine right up until the last repot and the last styling. I had already committed a major sin. You can tell by how short everything was that we did a heavy needle reduction and a heavy bud cutting. We did that, which should have put us in probably an energy negative, or probably, if it had been fed and otherwise healthy, an energy break-even state. And we should not have done. I should not have repotted this tree, but I was kind of seeing it turn a little bit and wondering if the repot may have helped. So that was something that I did there. I could look back and say you were already noticing the problem before you did the repot. You were hoping the repot was going to help. But what we also did was I did a heavy styling on this tree after I did a needle thinning and a bud reduction, and that is a no-no. I've done that a bunch of times actually, and I've gotten away with it for the most part. But then when you add in there within a 3-month period, I had decandled the tree and cut and thinned the needles, and then I did a heavy styling, and you can kind of see 2 places where I lassoed the tree, and you can kind of see a little bit where my tie wrap there on the end is digging in. That was an old wound. I didn't help it. We probably that was huge. I should have rubber treated that so that it didn't go in there. I should have probably also pasted that better, but there are 2 such marks like that. So 1, I shouldn't have restyled the tree when I restyled it. 2, the repotting I did to try to save it didn't help. It still declined right on. So that didn't help. That probably hurt it. 3, the main thing I did wrong was that after decandling the tree and thinning the bud, I then went on and did everything I wanted to do to the tree, like the rules of bonsai don't apply to us. And sometimes I do feel that way for a list of reasons that I'm going to start trying to work on. 1, I think that because our winter here is so temperate, and some trees are like Japanese black pines, for the most part, they're happy as heck here. You know, if you've got some Japanese black pines and they're growing here, you can probably expect some really lush looking, you can throw one of these in your yard here in California and probably expect to see, maybe water it during the drought, but otherwise you're probably good to go with a pretty happy tree that's going to accept life here. And I lean on that. I also bought 2 rounds of 10 pine trees so that I would have material to film and do videos for. And we would also use this material to learn. And as a part of that, learning from our mistakes is all a part of it. Now, having said that, I turned some of these guys into little pieces of what I consider artwork, and I really, really love them. So to play fast and loose with them like I've been doing, and at the same time, I didn't feel like I had to tell everybody every show, don't do as I do. I'm a YouTube creator, and I'm taking possibly unnecessary chances with a few of my trees so that we have material today. That's not always. I've never been lacking for imagination. I should probably wean that some. But everybody's been guilty of it. When you start watching YouTube videos, you'll see demonstrations where people are doing live demonstrations for bonsai shows, and some of those videos are circulating. And somebody flew in and went to town on a donor tree for the sake of the demonstration, and they were knowing, maybe they're known for a certain trick or a certain hack, and they were coming in to do that show. And when they do that kind of stuff, there's no thoughts given to the time of year, to whether or not that tree is going to be into that. They're more thinking about the crowd sitting in the audience is going to be able to take this information and go home and use it. And the people that are watching this from their homes are probably going to be watching this all times of year. So the time that it was, the reality is when they were done with the demonstration, the tree may or may not have made it. That may have not even have been a consideration going in. It was more about doing the demonstration so that people would get the knowledge than it was turning that one particular piece into something. I now see that as something that we should be able to avoid, and I would have always seen that, but I didn't always know when I was doing it. I would kind of use my temperate climate as a crutch, and but again, that's how we learn. You know, I repotted a lot of everything that you see in a cool little bonsai pot would have gone from no bonsai pot in a plug to a carton or a small disposable soft pot, and then from there to a bonsai pot, and none of those trees are over 2 years old. So yeah, they all would have been repotted multiple times in a very short span. And if they've been styled, that's also happened. And if they don't have enormously long needles, then that's also happened. And in the trees that I've seen where I've done all of those things too, and leaned on the fact that they were young, and this was San Francisco, California, so between those two things, I got away with a lot. We probably would not have our losses had I not had 100+ degree day in October. Worst time of the year going into fall to start having scorching temperatures. That's also what happens here in the Bay Area. That's not the rarest occurrence in the world. So winter, fall and winter here in the Bay Area, we don't get snow, not even inches, let alone feet. Today we're in the mid 70s up here, and it's January 17th. Next week at this time, we will be in one of our heaviest bands of showers. But then again, our temperatures still won't hit freezing. I don't think we've hit below 40 yet this year, and it's been a little cooler than it has in the last couple. But we're not out of the woods yet. I don't have a tree here that I'm concerned about freezing, although that could be my next lesson. 40 degrees plus a 15-mile-an-hour wind, and we could lose a few trees, and I should probably think about that. But here in California, what I found is that watering your trees when the metabolism has slowed down and the heat's down, and you don't have that evaporation to lean on, you don't have that warming of the pots, which causes them to kind of percolate the water out a little faster or vape it off faster. It's really hard to balance. It's really easier to rot your roots a little, and you really got to stay on that. You can't lean on that. You can't say, well, I freaking hate watering in the winter when there's not as much cool stuff to look at anyway, so we'll just let winter. No, you still got to go out there and do your time. You still have to go out there. When you water, it's not a matter of a schedule or a matter of a pattern, because if it is, you stand to lose stuff, because trees don't live and die in patterns necessarily. But at the same time, how you check can absolutely be a matter of pattern. While we're on topic, this is still a good time to wire this guy. What wiring? I have done a little bit of wiring to this guy. We've done the Japanese cork bark black pine. I've done part 1, I've done part 2, and that's probably 45 minutes in total of wiring. And what that has done for us is I've pulled these limbs that got wiring noticeably down, pulled them down. I've created more light and more area in here, and what I hope to receive from that is pushback of bud growth, more back budding, and I would like for some of the parts of the tree that had not been getting enough light to find themselves moving out of the shadow a little bit. So, and I think the look was real good. Also, I've been snake bit this past year. I bought on auction 2 Japanese cork bark pines, and I don't think either one of them survived shipping, which is to say they both died within a month and a half of my taking possession of them. So I usually can't kill a pine tree that fast, unless it kind of just showed up looking good but not feeling its best. So some of the stuff that I've learned is it's way easier to break limbs on these things, and I've since then learned why. The vasculary system of the cork bark trees is especially small compared to non-cork bark. Even though that bark makes them look huge, if you cut one of those cork bark limbs off and look at the cross section, the living tissue part is going to be a tiny dot in the center, and there's going to be a huge wedge of wood to either side of it. So almost any attempt to put motion in that will cause all of that wide bark to act as a fulcrum and will break them. So when I was learning about how to style these, basically what I learned was do it early before they form cork bark, or you run a major risk of mostly tearing the limbs off. So the limbs that we've been wiring are the ones that are adolescent. They're not barked over yet. When they get thicker, I have to cut that off. I can't push these branches the way I do healthy little Japanese black pines. Bend them until you see them weep a little, or until you see something open up, and then cut, paste it, and keep going if you want to, until you can get away with that with what I can get away with that with the tree right next to it. Not so much this guy. So we did part 1, we did part 2. It's time to proceed to part 3. I feel like this is a little tedious for me. I don't enjoy it as much, but it's also good work, it's good practice, and it makes for a good show, and it is also necessary. So in the next couple of weeks or so, I've been wanting to back off, look at what we've done so far, see if we see any change in color as a result of our bringing these limbs down. And so far, all things are looking good, and I'm thinking it's about time to go back in there for part 3 and part 4. I'd like to have part 4 be pretty much wrapping up I may not wire the whole tree, but I'm just going to go in and take it on a part 3 and part 4 kind of a thing. See, I can bring that down probably about that much. And then if you look, the next row of branches and buds above that, those will all get more light. If I even pull that down a slight amount, and as I bring that back up, we close off all of this area in here to light. So that's how we will get a fuller tree. And right now we are still kind of backed off. You can see those needles are quite long. We're feeding the tree. We didn't do a candle prune this past year, so we had some discoloration from heat. The tops get the hottest because we are under fairly intense UV lighting, and whereas the UV lighting is just what the doctor ordered, 365 days a year, on 2 hot days it will show up on some trees at the very top, where the intensity of light meets the intensity of heat from the ambient. So other trees spot overheat, or I've also had 1 or 2 that burned at the tips, whereas my tree that burned at the tips. Anyway, some of these burned at the top of the tips, and that was evident day 2 after our little heat stroke. So that's pretty much some things that I've been talking about and been thinking about during this winter time. We don't have as much predators to worry about, although we don't get a pass on those necessarily. They are seasonal here too. We're not going to have as much as some of some of our insects and stuff, but it's we can't necessarily take that for granted here. The other thing about winter is having defoliated our bald cypress, having pruned back our growth. We're building secondary, we're building foundation on some. We've got a really good start on secondary on major parts of this tree, and we're starting to tip a little toe into tertiary on some parts of this tree. But right now, it's 3 bare sticks with 4 pretty bare tops. And you just get, after the work we did, I'm glad to say I didn't really do anything risky with these guys, or this time of year would be especially painful. Because if you do something to your deciduous trees that is risky, and then you lose all your leaves or you lose all your needles, or you do whatever they're going to do in the wintertime, you have to spend that whole time waiting to see if the whole tree is going to bud back out again. And I remember the winter, the summer, I did this wedge cut. Whoop, whoop. After that, I really got antsy to see whether or not I was going to see anything bud out past that chop. It's like, we won't know until next spring whether or not the tree choked on that hit and kept moving along. This year, we've been feeding the tree for a couple of years. Last year, it pruned out a whole lot, budded out just a whole bunch. This year, we're already starting to see a lot of swelling in our trunks. Like I was saying, that bark is crackling off. Oh, yeah, no, I mentioned something and got a couple of comments on it. I was talking about these and removing or not removing bark. And I have seen some trees that people just keep immaculate, like it's just like I hinted to the honey colored and waxy looking. They almost look like wax copies of trees. They were kind of like shiny and orange or honey colored. But I've also, an instructor was telling me another trick with these guys. If you wanted to try to somehow get movement, there's things you do and things that you can also do, and some of those things are considered bad, and some of those things you might be surprised are not considered bad. But that doesn't mean that anybody who doesn't consider it bad have done them. What are you talking about, Patricia? For instance, if I were to go out to that pine tree out there in the lot and peel a big piece of bark off of it and then stick it to the side of this tree down here, that would be bad. That would be fake stuff, right? However, if I move this tree and set it down on the display table and a large chunk of its bark came off, something that really denoted its age and its years, and even skip that, it just might leave a big discolored spot where that flake of bark ran off. Then if I want to pick that piece of bark up, put a piece of cut paste on the bottom of it, and stick it back where it belongs, that's not considered poor form. That's considered restoration of the piece. Personally, I think that handling your tree without knocking bark off of it is a part of it, and I'm not really that likely to be the person who would pick up a piece of dead bark and go gluing it back on my tree. I've seen total pros do it, and they're like, yeah, screw you if you think, you don't have to like it, it's my tree, kind of an attitude. And I would agree with that. It's on the table as a trick, and it's not necessarily something that you have to disclose when you sell the tree. If it's a fake, or if it's a piece of driftwood that you grafted a living tree to, I think you should tell people that it's a replica or it's a copy or it's a Hinoki. Yeah, definitely think you should disclose that. So, to that end, when somebody was talking about how they would put motion in a limb with that much bark, they said they would break off the bark so that it would allow them to put a bend in the tree. And then they, after having made that bend, they would glue that piece of bark back. And then, as an afterthought, that instructor mentioned that there was a grower in Japan who everybody thought was nuts, because he was nuts, evidently, because he wanted his trees to look immaculate. He wanted them to look hairless, flawless, and clean. And his idea was they were devoid of bark. Why you would grow a tree for all those many years and then take away its coolest feature was something that had everybody scratching their heads. But that was a little bit of context on a statement I mentioned I think in the last video. And to that end, people were asking me about, what the hell, a Japanese black pine with no bark? Yeah. I didn't say I failed to mention that it was explained to me that the guy was nuts going into it, and they didn't drop names. They just said basically some crazy person who will go unnamed. Anyway, like and subscribe if you guys have not already. Tonight, I can already tell you what tonight's post is going to be. It'll be in Frida's place with that little darling sitting by my side. I will bring in that tray of Ponderosa pines, and we will weed them and look at them and compliment their strong points and see if there's anything we've done wrong or we need to do over. And like and subscribe if you guys have not already. Like I said, our next post will be tonight. We are going to do some Ponderosas, and then tomorrow we'll probably do another sunny show. Maybe bring in our Japanese cork bark for part 3 of wiring our Japanese cork bark pine. I appreciate you, and Frida appreciates you, and I hope where you are, your winter is bearable. I know that our winter gives us special needs and special situations. I'm not making a big deal over our winters. They are why I moved here, because they're not snow laden. I don't have high winds and cold temperatures and icy roads to contend with. And I feel for all you guys who are having to deal with real winter. I could just see people rolling their eyes going, yeah, tell me about your problems, Pat. No, these are mistakes I've made and not things that I would consider to be always real problems. But it's just some perspective. And thank you so much for watching.